What was Luke's reaction to the death of Mara Jade, and why did it make a very powerful Sith Lord fear for his life? Greetings acolytes, and welcome back to the archives. In the Legends EU continuity, Luke Skywalker would find love in the most unlikely of places, a woman named Mara Jade who was once an assassin for the Emperor sent to kill him. When she made herself known during the Thrawn crisis, Luke and Mara would be enemies for years before they came together and decided to marry. Although the passive Luke and the brash Mara had opposing personalities, they both had a passion for protecting the ones that they cared for, which ended up making them the perfect couple to run the new Jedi Order. However, about 30 years after they first met, Mara Jade Skywalker would tragically perish in the Second Galactic Civil War. What's worse is that no one knew the cause of her death for a very long time, and the mystery regarding her killer nearly drove Luke to the brink of the dark side. In doing so, the threat of merciless retribution terrified the Sith Lord responsible, as they knew just how powerful the Grandmaster was, especially if he was hellbent on revenge. So join us today as we open a holocron and explore the tragedy of Mara Jade's death, and how Luke barely managed to recover from it. The year was 40 ABY, and the firstborn son of Han and Leia had fallen to the dark side in Jacen Solo. Unlike the story of other Skywalkers coming into the throes of the darkness only to be rescued, this one would not have a happy ending. Forever did the dark side dominate young Jacen Solo's destiny, and it all started with a misguided vision. After traveling around the galaxy, gaining knowledge of the Force from various different sources and religions, Jacen would encounter Lumaya, a dark lady of the Sith. Lumaya personally had it out for Luke, having been a cybernetic assassin trained by Vader directly, and one of the last of the Sith. Through no fault of Luke's own, he had been responsible for her mutilation years ago, making her ongoing mission to kill him intensify. After receiving Sith artifacts like the ancient Adis holocron, Lumaya got with another darkseid wielder named Vergir after the Yuzhong Vong War, and together they plotted a way for the Sith to return. Their plan revolved around the induction of a powerful Jedi Knight that would have the strength to spearhead their new operation. A chosen one, if you will. The two of them decided that the one would be Jacen Solo, the potently powerful scion of the Skywalker family, who had previously been single-handedly responsible for ending the Yuzhong Vong invasion. Jacen would be enticed to the dark side not out of a quest for power, at least not originally, but because he had a terrible vision. Jacen, who had the Shatterpoint ability like Mace Windu, foresaw that in the future, if he did not ally with the Sith, he would kill Luke and throw the galaxy into chaos. Wanting to prevent this, he did the only thing that was right at that time. Even if it seemed counterintuitive, Jacen became a Sith Lord. Jacen would train with Lumaya, and eventually was dubbed Darth Kaitis, one of the strongest and most vile Sith in the entire Order. Quickly, Jacen devolved into a state of true darkness, turning against his family, taking control of the Galactic Alliance, and starting a new civil war. But for a long time, Jacen had remained largely in the shadows, and no one yet knew the identity of this Darth Kaitis, until Luke Skywalker's own son, Ben. It was Ben who made the connection that Jacen's affiliation with Lumaya had turned him. He told his mother, and Mara Jade felt that it was her personal responsibility to find Jacen, refusing all the help from Luke and several others, sensing that Jacen and her fate were eternally tied. You see, Mara Jade had originally thought that Lumaya was coming after her son Ben, and that Lumaya wanted to turn Ben Skywalker to the dark side. However, after a duel with Lumaya, Ben filled her in about Jacen's fall to the dark side. So after cornering him and attempting to bring Jacen back to the light, Jacen manages to give her the slip and escaped, having no intention of killing her there. It was after this though, that searching through the Force, Mara Jade felt deeply that Jacen had been lost to the dark side forever, and would never return as Vader had. As Mara understood the dark side better than most Jedi in the Academy, she once again took responsibility upon herself to see this threat ended, while Mara had the chance, and wanted to kill Jacen. This resulted in a mad chase for Jacen and his starship, ending with a dogfight over the planet known as Kavan. The two would crash into the caverns of Kavan, where they had their final confrontation. Mara Jade began by using the Force to collapse the ceiling on top of Jacen before attempting to shoot him point blank with her blaster. In response, Kaitis released a Force repulse which not only blew all of the debris off of him, but deflected the blaster bolt as well. The fight between Mara Jade and Darth Kaitis was scrappy and rough, with it clearly being one-sided in favor of Jacen, who was vastly more naturally powerful in the Force. However, Mara Jade was able to keep up through her intense assassin's training. Her agile movements kept Jacen on his toes until she was eventually able to disarm him and get him on the ground. Mara was poised with a vibro knife, ready to kill Jacen there. And this is where Kaitis pulled a cheap move, a trick, and suddenly cast an illusion of Ben Skywalker. Mara hesitated for the briefest of moments, allowing Jacen to shoot her with a poison dart, ending the battle there. As Mara lay dying quickly but painlessly as the poison made its way through her system, in Mara Jade's final moments, she took this opportunity to curse him, telling him that he had become more vile and cruel than even Sidious was. Mara professed that Luke would come for him, strike him down, and destroy Kaitis. And with that, Mara Jade used the last of her energy to send a loving projection into the mind of her son and her husband. And with that, Mara Jade Skywalker was no more. However, even in death, she was very clever and did not pass on into the Force, at least not yet. She wanted to leave her physical remains behind so that the Jedi could find her, perform an autopsy, and discover the truth of Jacen Solo. In the end, her plan worked, as the Jedi did manage to find her body. Master Killiga performed the autopsy and found the poison. However, they did not ascertain that Jacen was the one responsible. Up until that point, Jacen had been distant from the Skywalker family, and although people suspected he had given in to the dark side, it had not been officially confirmed that he was this Darth Kaitis. Only Mara Jade knew that information, and only Ben had his suspicions. We say this because Jacen attended Mara Jade's funeral publicly, and although his presence was disruptive, he was still able to come and go as pleased. But it was only after Jacen arrived that Mara Jade allowed her body to vanish into the Force, transcending, and Ben Skywalker took this as a sign that it was Jacen who had murdered his mother. Luke was absolutely crushed by her death. His training meant nothing as he was flung into grief. He had experienced a lot of death, especially death with his own family, but Mara had managed to make all of that go away. She restored Luke to the family that he had lost in Padme, Anakin, Owen, Beru, and Obi-Wan. It was because of Mara Jade that Luke's belief in the light side of the Force grew stronger. He preached that Jedi need people to love in order to make their conviction in the light and power in the Force grow to the level that it needed to be. A Jedi must feel what it means to protect the lives of the loved ones without becoming too jealous for them. Luke had managed to achieve this perfectly with his wife Mara Jade, but now, like so many others, Mara was gone. Luke now had to feel that it was a test of his own ideology and battle with the dark side, one that he swore to protect his loved ones that had died. Simply put, Luke Skywalker put on a brave face for his son and for the Jedi, but he was inconsolable, and all of these feelings funneled into the only place that made sense to Luke. That was Lady Lumaya. In Luke's mind, she was responsible. It was the only thing that made sense. Luke had actually been trying to save Lumaya for so long. Luke had tried to save her, but Lumaya continuously proved herself to be nothing more than a heartless Sith. However, in this instance, her hands were clean. Luke, though, did not search the Force for his answer like he would have in times gone by. Instead, the Anakin side of Luke took control, and he sought out Lumaya on his own. A path of vengeance. This would clash in a final battle, where Grandmaster Luke had absolutely no mercy for the Dark Woman. This last duel concluded with Lumaya's decapitation, one of the most brutal executions that Luke has ever committed, removing her head from her shoulders. Luke believed that he hadn't acted fully out of vengeance, but rather out of justice. However, that sentiment would quickly fade when Ben revealed that it was in fact Jacen who had killed Mara Jade, not Lumaya. While Luke was away, Ben had been performing his own investigation, and he had found evidence that Jacen Solo was Darth Kaitis and had killed his mother. Jacen was gone. There was only a Sith now. Luke realized that he had given into the dark emotions and killed someone who was indeed a Sith Lord, but she was innocent of the crime that he executed her for. His grief only got worse as he came to remember how slippery the dark side was. He had betrayed everything that he represented as the Grand Master, and he had insulted Mara Jade's memory by tainting it with bloodlust. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Darth Caedus was petrified with fear. The threat of the Grand Master's retribution was upon him, and he expected Luke would strike him down in their next duel. His master Lumaya had fallen brutally to the Jedi blade, and for all Jacen knew, Luke was consumed by his vengeance. On top of everything Caedus was dealing with, he now worried that the most powerful Jedi in history was coming for his head, just as Mara Jade had promised him. Although Darth Caedus was incredibly powerful in his own right, and didn't doubt his abilities, he was concerned about whether or not he could stand up to an unchained Luke Skywalker. Luckily for Caedus though, this would never happen, as Luke rejected the notion of revenge and had decided not to confront Jacen at all. After he had already done to Lumaya, Luke believed it was no longer his place to be the one to face Caedus. Instead, later on, Jacen's fate would fall into the hands of his twin sister, Jacen Solo, and the two of them would have their now famous duel. But that, my friends, is the story of the death of Mara Jade Skywalker, and the rage that it left with Luke. As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel and the archives today. Subscribe if you've been enjoying this daily Star Wars lore, and I hope you're having a great one.